One of our greatest U.S. presidents was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. If you visit Washington, D.C., you'll see the sweeping memorial dedicated to him and his greatest achievement, the New Deal. This was the domestic program, the lifeline, that pulled America out of the Great Depression, giving us immediate economic relief and lasting reforms in labor, finance, and social welfare. But FDR didn't build it alone. His achievements were made possible by two amazing women. One was his formidable wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, whom I will be profiling here soon. The other, she was the architect of the New Deal. Her name, Frances Perkins. She was the woman who gave voice to the core philosophy of this revolutionary government program. As she wrote, "The people are what matter to government, and a government should aim to give all the people under its jurisdiction the best possible life." Today, we're telling the story of the first woman in a U.S. presidential cabinet, the woman who fought for the 40-hour work week, the minimum wage, and yes, Social Security. First, a bit about how you can shape HerStance into a legacy for the generation who is moving into a position of action. Consider supporting this podcast by sharing episodes you like with your friends and commenting about them on Instagram and Facebook at HerStance with Sandra. Now, back to our revolutionary Frances Perkins. Frances Perkins was born Fanny Coralie Perkins in 1880 into a strict conservative Massachusetts family, tracing their heritage back to early American colonization. But her true identity was shaped not by her father's Republican politics, but by the women around her. She said later in life, "I am extraordinarily the product of my grandmother." She graduated from Mount Holyoke College in 1902, majoring in physics. But a class in American economic history, which included visits to nearby mills, shocked her conscience. She saw child labor, dangerous conditions, and endless work hours. It fundamentally shifted her path away from the expected destiny of domesticity and into direct action. She changed her name, converted her faith, and instead of teaching, went straight to Chicago's Hull House to work with fellow radical Jane Addams. The settlement movement was her boot camp. This was a movement driven primarily by women advocating for political and social reforms in urban slums. Frances embraced this new identity, stating, "Feminism means revolution, and I am a revolutionist." In 1911, in New York City, that revolution got its ultimate catalyst. Frances witnessed the horrific Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. 146 young immigrant women, many just girls, trapped behind locked doors and killed. Deeply affected, she took on her first major role, chief investigator for the New York State Factory Investigating Commission. Her efforts led to the passage of 33 new labor laws in New York, fundamentally rewriting the state's industrial code and proving that a woman reformer could achieve what many male politicians only debated. Her reputation wasn't just built on passion. It was built on hard evidence, shrewd political maneuvering, and an iron will to get results. After the Factory Commission, she continued to rise, a woman climbing the male-dominated political ladder of New York. She served on the State Industrial Commission and then, in 1929, Governor Franklin D. Roosevelt appointed her as New York State Industrial Commissioner, a post usually reserved for men. This was her proving ground. She cut red tape, cracked down on unsafe workplaces, and built the coalition of labor and political support that would later become her New Deal foundation. By 1933, when President Roosevelt formed his administration to combat the Great Depression, he knew who he needed: Frances Perkins, the most qualified person for the job, regardless of gender. He appointed her Secretary of Labor, making her the first woman in U.S. history to serve in a presidential cabinet. The day she was sworn in, amid a national banking emergency, she was making history. Frances knew the weight of this moment. The pressure was immense. She later reflected on her historic appointment, stating, "The door might not be open to a woman again for a long, long time, and I had a kind of duty to other women to walk in and sit down on the chair that was offered, and so establish the right of others long hence and far distant in geography to sit in the high seats." This wasn't just a job, it was a mandate. Her male colleagues viewed her with suspicion, often attacking her reserved demeanor and even her appearance instead of her policies. "The accusation that I am a woman is incontrovertible," she wrote in her memoir. But Frances was strategic. She took notes on her male colleagues' comments, filing them under a red envelope labeled "Notes on the Male Mind." She entered those cabinet meetings equipped with one thing: overwhelming evidence and research. This wasn't about being loud or dominating the room. It was about being absolutely, factually right. Her policy goals were clear, and she would not be deterred. Minimum wage, maximum work hours, worker protections, unemployment insurance, pensions for the elderly. All of these became the law of the land: the Social Security Act of 1935 and the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. As one insider quipped, President Roosevelt may not have been interested in a Social Security bill, but he was simply pacifying Frances. She didn't advise the president. She held his feet to the fire until the American worker was protected. Her success made her a target. Opponents of the New Deal, especially those against the legalization of unions, leveled every attack imaginable against her, including a ridiculous conspiracy theory that Frances, a practicing Episcopalian, was secretly Jewish, a bigoted smear used to undermine her progressive agenda. In 1939, they went so far as to move for her impeachment, accusing her of plotting to overthrow the government because she wouldn't deport a labor organizer. It was a vicious, baseless attack, but she sat through the entire process. Her defense, however, was a powerful, eloquent statement of her life's work. "I have done what I could in time to make this great country of ours nearer our conception of the city of God. I have consistently favored not only enforcement of law, but also a firm adherence to the basic American standards of fair play." Frances Perkins served as Labor Secretary until FDR's death in April 1945, staying with her post for 12 years, the longest-serving Labor Secretary in history and the only cabinet member to serve for Roosevelt's entire presidency. She never sought the spotlight, often crediting her ideas and successes to the president. She understood that for a woman in her position at that time, public attention meant political danger. She was the meticulous, detail-oriented reformer who ensured that every law was bulletproof. Her one concession to the spectacle of her position was the sight of her heels and handbag under the cabinet table. But her fight didn't end when her cabinet post did. In 1946, President Truman appointed her to the U.S. Civil Service Commission, where she served for 8 more years, ensuring fair hiring practices in government, furthering her mission of equity for all workers. She spent her final years lecturing and teaching, continuing to advocate for her legacy of social justice. She later summed up her entire mission with a simple, profound statement. I came to Washington to work for God, FDR, and the millions of forgotten, plain, common working men. Though not always as celebrated as her male counterparts, her legacy endures in the policies that shape your life every single day. Frances Perkins was laid to rest beneath a modest headstone in Maine, but her impact is woven into the very fabric of American social justice. She didn't just walk in the door. She helped rebuild the house and then stood guard for decades to ensure its foundation never crumbled. You've reached the HerStance Challenge. Frances Perkins didn't just advocate for change. She was a strategic revolutionist who worked behind the scenes to gather the facts she needed to dismantle injustice. She understood that being the first means having the duty to establish the right for all who follow. So, for this week's HerStance Activism Challenge, we invite you to take up 2 of Perkins' most powerful tools: strategic observation and structural advocacy. Challenge 1, the red envelope data audit. Inspired by Frances Perkins' own file, Notes on the Male Mind, we challenge you to become the silent, strategic documentarian. For the next 2 weeks, create your own digital or physical red envelope file. Every time you witness a situation that subtly or overtly undermines a woman's authority, credibility, or contribution in a meeting or public setting, write it down. Record the facts. Review your data and use this evidence, Perkins' most powerful tool, to identify where you can advocate for systemic change in your own workplace or community. Challenge 2, the structural safety net advocacy. Perkins created the pillars of our American safety net: Social Security, minimum wage, and the end of child labor. Your challenge is to connect with and support one local organization working today on a core Perkins issue: fighting for a living wage, stronger child welfare protections, or providing support for immigrant and refugee employment. Give them 1 hour of your time or commit to one defined action. By supporting the organizations that embody her values, you carry Frances Perkins' revolution forward. Thank you again for joining me for this profile of Frances Perkins, the architect who helped build the City of God in America. She didn't just walk in the door. She ensured that for the first time, millions of forgotten Americans had a safety net beneath them. You can find links of resources and examples for both of these challenges in the show notes today. Be sure to share your action and comment on Instagram and Facebook at HerStance with Sandra. Until next time, find your chair.